Good evening. We are still at the Holekane Mentorship Camp, and we have another dignitary, Dr. Cynthia Kumalo, who is the Acting Director General of the Department of Sports and Culture. Firstly, let me thank you for taking a moment to sit down with us. Let us just talk about the government's role in countering GBV, because today we are here mainly because of GBV. What's the government's role in this whole process?
Thank you very much. Government has recognized the responsibility around addressing this pandemic, as the president called it, called GBVF. Don't forget the F, please, because while we recognize the fact that there's a lot of violence which is gender related, but also specifically directed at women or females, we also recognize the fact that in a lot of cases it has led to femicide. So this campaign or intervention program is part of government as contribution. But if I bring it closer to home, it's part of the contribution of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture to the bigger program of government. There is an existing gender-based violence and femicide strategy that government a few years ago approved. Now, as I'm saying, when you bring it closer to home, amongst the key priorities of government has been the priority around social cohesion and nation building. And the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture has been given that responsibility of coordinating and leading social cohesion and nation building in the country. And this is part of the intervention.
So we have a lot of NGOs, which organizations and NGOs which are trying to also combat this. I like to call it a pandemic,
Yeah.
which are trying to combat this pandemic. Is the government working hand in hand with them? And if there is a way that the government has been supporting this types of organizations, how has the government been doing that?
I'll focus more on what the Department of Sport, Arts and
Okay,
Culture
yes,
has
ma'am.
been doing. As you see in this program today, we are partnering with other non-government organizations that are doing amazing work out there. And it's important for us to acknowledge the role of, for instance, Boys to Men, the role of, for instance, Ikamva Youth. All those are non-government organizations that are working within communities. So there are CPOs, there are other such structures. So in partnering, if you look at this intervention program, if we were to go on our own, we don't think it would really translate to sustainability, because what is important is how do you sustain this intervention beyond just having these young people here. So Boys to Men, Ikamva Youth and other NGOs, because they are amongst the communities, are capable of doing that, because government on its own cannot be able to make a difference in as far as such a pandemic. And you are correct, it is a pandemic. In fact, as I was saying earlier on, the president of this country has called it a pandemic, and as a country, we are all responsible for making sure that we participate in partnership and collaboration if we are ever to make any impact.
Okay, so someone might ask, gender-based violence is not biased towards any gender. So why is this program focusing mainly on boys?
We've got several programs, actually. This is just one of them. We've got several programs that is a response proactively and actively to issues of gender-based violence. Because, again, when I'm saying reactively, we don't want to be always reacting. Something has happened and we are reacting. But this particular program, the Hulekane program, doesn't just focus on men or on young men.
Okay.
The intervention that started on Thursday, the boys' camp, is focusing on a conversation between older men and younger men because they've been there and done that, and we feel they are better positioned to change the mindset of the younger men or the boys. But there are other programs that we do. For instance, a few years ago, we had a survivors program that was focusing on women that have been victims, where they themselves talk about what happened to them, but not just for sympathy purposes, but for, again, changing the mindset, but also assisting a younger woman not to fall into the same pitfalls that they might have fallen to. We partner with provinces. For instance, as the national department, there are funds that we transfer to provinces for them to be able, in partnership, as you were saying earlier on, with other existing organizations, to be able to campaign against this pandemic. So there are others. The focus cuts across young women, older women, young men, and older men as well.
Yes, you mentioned that we should not forget the F in
Yes.
GBV. So can you just elaborate on the F? I know a lot of us know about the GBV part, but
Yeah.
we are not quite aware of
Familiar.
the F. So can you just elaborate more on that?
What we have seen, and it's very concerning, you might recall a few years ago, we had incidents where a young woman going to university was actually killed. And there is many of such examples where domestic violence ends up translating to femicide. So what we're talking about is, let's not, as a country, just talk about the fact that there's a lot of violence, but we must recognize the fact that if you look at the statistics that SAPS always announce, for instance, you will see that the figures when it comes to women that die in the hands of their partners, for instance, keeps growing. Hence, we are saying femicide becomes important as well to address.
So what would we say is the main issue here? What do we need to address? What's the main cause? What's the reason behind this? Based on the stats that you have as government and the research and everything, what would you say is building up to such numbers and statistics?
In our view, it's basically addressing the social ills around society. Because a young a man, because we're talking about men here today, a young man grows up watching his father abusing his mother. And he thinks that's a norm. He thinks that's normal, you know. I'm not limiting the reasons to that. There might be a number of reasons, you know. Issues of financial dependency, for instance, make women stay in the house or in the home even though they are being abused, you know. Just because they are financially dependent on their partner, they continue staying there. So there could be a variety of reasons, the ones that I'm mentioning, and other reasons that lead to that. And through this intervention as a Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, we are saying young men, talk, have a conversation, because if you talk to them, they will tell you about the different incidents that they see and they experience. It might not be within a family, but it might be within the community or the society that they reside in.
Okay, so in closing, just a word of encouragement towards somebody who has been a victim of, you know, this pandemic. What would you tell that particular person if she was here right now?
I've been a victim of abuse. So when I talk about these things, I know exactly what I'm talking about. And I like what the people that were talking inside were saying. It's important, if you're talking about young women, for instance, to actually encourage independence. Because as I'm saying, some of the examples we've seen is young women, older women staying in a relationship just because they are dependent. But if we encourage education, for instance, if we encourage an element of dependency, it really makes that person not reliant completely on that particular partner and being willing to continue being exposed to an abusive relationship just because they are dependent. But we also want to send a message as government or as a Department of Sport, Arts and Culture around the fact that our responsibility goes back to social cohesion and nation building. And if we are to build this country, let us start inculcating a kind of a mindset that says a woman is important. A young man is important, an older man is important, because as it says, it's about gender, it's not just about females as such. So what I would say to that person who's being subjected to abuse is recognize the fact that you are being subjected to abuse. Because sometimes it starts with recognition, especially if you look at relationships. People think, he loves me, that is why he hits me. You know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
If he doesn't hit me, it means that he doesn't really care. So you need to start by recognizing the fact that this is actually abuse.
Oh, quite a beautiful encouragement, and I like the part where you included that it's from experience. So there is no experience is a good teacher. In short.
Exactly.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Doctor, for sitting down with us. We appreciate each and every single thing that you've shared with us.
Thank you so much.